Up here is the infinite. Down here is where we are now. Imagination is real. What we imagine is instantly available and created in the process of imagining inside the framework of our consciousness, which is connected within the network of all consciousness. The work, the practice, the muscle building is bringing that reality into the metaphor, into the illusion of physical reality. And to do that, to bring the real into the simulation, energy has to take two paths. The first path is belief. If you do not believe something can be done, it cannot be done. Now, everything is possible in some time frame, in some recipe, using some technology, 99.9% of which is currently in the unknown and in the unknown unknown. But for us to manifest it in the simulation, we must believe that it is possible. The other path is technology. And at any given point, one or the other of these is the limiting factor. Up here is the infinite. Down here is where we are now. As we set out towards a goal to manifest or realize, meaning something that's real, to bring it into physical existence, we need a pairing of belief and technology. And we need choice. The choice to believe, the choice to pursue. But in order to realize that choice, we need a belief that it is possible, and we need the technology. Now, within the framework and paradigm of technology, we have science, we have time, we have technique, we have recipes that are necessary to make anything realized in physical illusion. Now, here we are. Here you and I are. And we set our sights on something out here. Let's say you want to start an institute. You want to start an institute where 1,000 people every year realize their potential, discover who they are, wake up, and develop unique and extraordinary talents and bring them out into the world. Every year, you want to give birth to awakened, effective human beings. That's the goal. That's the idea. Now, for that to be manifested in the simulation, the first step is imagination. That's easy. Anything is possible in the abstract. You imagine it, and there you are. You imagine it, and you create your rendition, your version of that dream. So the imagination is instant. The desire for that object is spontaneous. I want it, I don't want it. I can imagine it, I want it, I don't want it. That's instant. But now the question is, do you believe that it is possible for you? Now, let's say you do. You say, I believe that it is possible for me. So you send out invitations. Here are the people I'd like to donate money to the Institute. Here are the people I'd like to attend the Institute. Here are the people I'd like to teach at the Institute. Here are the permits and approvals that I'd like to have realize the Institute. You send out, instructions to all the various players involved. I want you to do this and you to do this. And I believe that the Institute can happen. But nobody goes along with it, or 20% of the people that you need to realize that vision go along with it. Or you start and run out of money after $100,000. The belief is ahead of the technology. You see, there's a technology of relationship building. There's a technology of earned trust. There's a technology of making money. There's a technology of investing money. There's a technology of, you could call it political bribery or political quid pro quo, whatever it is. There's a technology to securing a political support. There's a technology to gaining the things that a politician or a local leader might pass. There's a technology of changing different law so that the Institute, in the way you imagine it, can be realized within the framework of law. There's the technology of recruiting the students. There's the technology of picking subject matter. There's the technology of psychology, how to achieve that goal of helping people wake up. There's the belief, and then there's the technology. Now, at any moment with our current technology, we have a probability field. Meaning the current technology I have allows me to move my arm, but it does not allow me to sever my arm and levitate it and still maintain control. I don't have that technology today. I have the technology to speak English, but if I want to communicate effectively to a Thai individual. I don't have the technology of competent Thai language. I have the technology to record this, but I don't have the technology to have beautiful graphics appear that I'm imagining. I have a boundary. I have a limit. And that limit, our given boundary, is incredibly important to be aware of. That's the boundary of technology. I have a belief, and I have a technical limit. If I want to lift 3,000 pounds, it doesn't matter if I believe that I can lift 3,000 pounds now. When I lift the weights, I can't get them off the ground. I believe I can, but the belief is ahead of the technology. So as we're creating the synergy of our lives, sometimes the technology is ahead of the belief, and sometimes the belief is ahead of the technology. Now, if the belief is too far ahead of the technology, and I believe that I can do anything, I can do everything, if the belief is too far ahead of the technology, without being grounded in boundaries, we have failure, despair, collapse, pain. I thought I could do it, but I couldn't. I said I would do it, but I didn't. I wanted to do it, but I didn't know how. Now, the other extreme can be there too. I can do this, but I don't believe I can create this reality. I don't believe that it's possible for me. I can talk, I can touch, I can do things, but I don't believe it's possible for me to be in a deeply loving, sustainable partnership. I don't see it. I can't see it. I don't see how that works. I don't believe it. I could do it, but I don't see how I could do it. I don't believe in it. Or I do believe in it, but I don't know how to actually do it. And so ultimately they come together. Meaning, if you believe something and you reference what's going on in your life all the time, and you moderate and regulate your belief based on what's going on. I believe that I can create great relationships. What's going on? I hurt these people's feelings. I feel clueless about why these people are angry at me. I didn't get invited to the events I wanted to go to. And so if you reference that and say, well, I believe it's possible, but I do not have the technology for that for what I want to be probable. Do I need more belief or do I need more technology? Because sometimes you have all that it takes, and the only thing holding you back is belief based on a self-image that was formed at the time when you did not have all that you needed. When you were 5 years old and you went swimming in the ocean, you nearly drowned. You were shocked. You didn't realize that there was an undertow. You didn't believe you were in danger. You thought you were safe. And the undertow took you down, and you nearly drowned. And it was lucky that other people could pull you out of the water. And at that time, a ton of bricks comes down on your body and says, you cannot survive the water alone. That becomes a belief. You cannot survive the water alone. I have a self-image of someone who cannot survive the water based on an experience of almost dying and recognizing that the only reason you didn't die is because you had help from people who were bigger. And that's the belief that sets in at 5 years old. This is now the belief. Well, the belief is stagnant. It's not revisited. But meanwhile, your body grows up. You learn to swim. You learn to analyze. You learn to buy and wear life jackets. You learn all kinds of new technology that now the reality is you could easily survive that same situation, but you don't believe you can survive that situation. And so the belief is the barrier. At other times, you might believe, oh, I could do that, that's easy. Race a NASCAR, easy. I've driven cars before. 200 miles an hour, no big deal. No problem, easy. I know I can do it. And you get into the car and you flip out, you spin out, you drive into a barrier before you reach the 200-mile mark or 100-mile-per-hour mark. And the barrier is not the belief. You know you can do it, and in the abstract you can, but you don't have the hours in. You don't have the training. You don't have the ability to stay focused on, you don't know which bits to look at. Because when you're going 200 miles per hour, you can't look at the same cues that you can look at when you're going 30 miles an hour. You have to know what to focus on. And it could be the movement of the right wheel. Is it beginning to slide on the road? And that's the only thing you need to pay attention to, plus the curb marker about 50 meters ahead, given your speed. That's what you need to, you have to have your eyes 50 meters ahead and then glance down at the tire and glance up and glance. And if you get that right, but you don't know that, you lack the technology. So you believe you can do it, you're willing to get into the car, but you spin out. And so the problems that we experience in realizing what we imagine in the illusion is when these two get out of sync. When the belief gets ahead of the body, or when the body gets ahead of the belief. Now, of these two problems, you have two different possible forms of harm. If the belief gets ahead of the body, and I'll just call the body the metaphor for all technology, presence of mind, resources, if you're going into space, etc., the type of metal, think going back in history. Now, if someone said in the 12th century, space flight is possible, they are absolutely correct. But if you say space flight is possible in the 12th century, before steel, before titanium, before it's not a useful belief to manifest spaceflight. But if you say, no, spaceflight is possible, it may take, at our current rate, some 500 years or so to do that, but what we need is this and what we need is that. And over the course of the next 60 years, I'm going to take it from being 98% delusion to only 50% delusion or only 30% delusion. I can do that. So there is a development of technology that's happening at day by day, and there's a development of belief. And we have this thing, if you see it, you believe it. But somebody who's developing the technology has to believe it before they see it, or they wouldn't develop the technology. But everyone, once they see something repeatedly done, once the Wright brothers managed to actually fly a plane repeatedly, there's nobody that says flight is impossible. But it is still impossible for the majority of people. Meaning, just because you realize flight is possible for an experienced pilot in certain weather who's developed a plane, that doesn't mean it's intelligent to say that it's possible for you. It is abstractly possible, but it's not probable. If I got into a 747 today, knowing that it is possible that I can fly it, I would crash it before I got off the ground. Because it's not probable that I would have the reflexes and presence of mind to guess what all those buttons do in the right order the first time. And there might not be a second time. Because if I crash into a hangar filled with fuel, the airplane, the hangar may be wrecked, and me with it. So, evolution, the realization of what we imagine, is always occurring. And sometimes it's going forward. We've had the technology all along, but we're just catching up the ability to imagine a use for it. And now we can imagine a full use for it. And as soon as we imagine a full use for it, then we can believe it. And now you've got a belief, an imagination, and a technology in parity, in balance, equals success. If you have the imagination and the belief, but the technology is down here, I can imagine exactly how a spaceship would work. Now I need a metal, I need a material that can handle 3,000 tons per square inch in bending and tensile strength. And I can imagine that material. And I believe that that material can be made. But the material that I can get my hands on, the only thing that I know of on the planet, has 1,000 pounds per square inch tensile strength, or whatever the number is. There's a gap. Right now we believe, and we know with certainty, that electric planes are possible. And we also know that they're probable in the future. That whether 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 150 years from now, it is highly probable that transatlantic flights will occur with electric engines or something else that we haven't invented yet. Highly likely. But we don't have the ability to get inexpensive battery density or storage of electricity to the point where it would be economically viable. If you make top-line state-of-the-art batteries and limited edition planes that work with those, and each ticket costs $7,000 or $20,000 to pay for the plane and that unusually small production rate, it's not probable. It's not going to work. Nobody's going to invest in that. It's the technology that isn't there. But if you believe on it, if you believe it, and you imagine it, and then you invest in getting the technology, and then getting the technology, and getting technology, eventually the technology. You see, Leonardo da Vinci imagined a helicopter. He believed in the helicopter. But he did not have the ability at that time to create the metals and the engines and the fuels necessary for a helicopter to function. And so the imagination and the belief came hundreds of years before the technology caught up. And so the technology was the limiting factor. So you need all three. You need the belief, you need the imagination, and you need the technology. If you've got all three, and you have willingness, which is another form of technology. That's the technology of desire, the technology of consciousness. We have the technology and the belief to feed every single person on the planet today. We can provide nourishing food for every single person on the planet today. We have the technology. We believe in the technology. We have the imagination. It's not hard. But we do not have the technology of consciousness. What do I mean by that? We're using a reptilian operating system. So a reptilian operating system does not function based on empathy. It functions based on power and based on fear. And so if we are afraid that there won't be enough for us, enough status, enough importance, enough love, enough money, we will not give the support, the time, the money to support that goal of food for every person. If we cannot transmit the meme of that technology, if we believe that there is enough, but all the people around us do not, and so we put money into charity and it's embezzled, or the charity is afraid that it's going to run out and not have enough, and so it puts more money into marketing to raise more money than into the project itself. Or the people working at the nonprofit don't believe they're going to have enough. And so their focus is not on how to feed the hungry. Their focus is how to keep their jobs and make more money and look good so that they can change career paths. And so the technology of consciousness is not available. In any important goal, and the purpose of this video is for evolution to occur, we must look out here in the future and identify the 1, 2, 3 key goals, the 4 key goals that can most efficiently benefit the sustainable evolution of our planet and of our species. We have to look out there and identify these are the goalposts. This is the direction that we need to go. And with each of these, there will be a limit and a level of our consciousness, of our willingness to want and move towards those goals versus some other thing. There will be a limit of technology. What do we currently have that would allow us to do that as a species? There will be a limit in the belief of whether it's possible or probable. You see, an investor doesn't want to know that there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that they could get their money back. The belief has to be at a point where it seems more probable than not, one, and that the return on the investment would be higher than the loss. So if an investor thinks that there's a 60% chance that they could make 3 times their money, the investor will take that bet, but they have to believe it. Then if the investor places 10 bets where there's a 60% chance that they triple their money, even though some of those bets will fail completely, the investor will have more money at the end of that round of 10 experiments than if they didn't invest the money. And so they will invest the money. So there has to be the belief. And there has to be the imagination. You have to be able to imagine it, believe it, want it, and then work within the technology to realize it or develop the technology if it does not currently exist. There is a technology. There is a technology somewhere, some way, at some time, by which anything is possible. But are we a year away, a century away, 1,000 years away, 1,000,000 years? What about 1 billion years? Are we 10 billion years away from that technology being realized, being commonplace? Now, the cell phones we have today would have seemed billions of years away to someone 2,000 years ago. Any one of us could go back in time 2,000 years and say, "Hello, Google, what's my location?" And that would be beyond the possibility field, beyond belief for the people 2,000 years ago. Is that a God? Is it a deity? What is it? It's beyond belief. That's just 2,000 years. Time is speeding up exponentially in many areas, which means that 2,000 years from now, more will have occurred than occurred in the last 2,000 years. Most of what has occurred in the last 150 years because time is speeding up. Which means in the next 1,000 years, you, me, our thoughts, our beliefs, our paradigms will be unrecognizable to the eyes we are using to see them today. For anything to transit from the reality of our imagination into the illusion into the video game, the simulation of our world today. We must believe it. We must act on that belief. We must invest in the technologies that make that belief realizable in form. And whether we succeed or not, and just as importantly, whether we believe we have failed or succeeded will have a lot to do with our sense of boundary. And if we thought this could be done next year, and we told the investors, and we told our family, and we told ourselves that this was a sure thing next year, and it's really true, it's just a sure thing in 20 years, then we're in extraordinary misery. We are considered without integrity, without, we don't have our feet on the ground. We can't be trusted. A lot of people look at Elon Musk and his forward-thinking comments and statements, and he's often late by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. He thought a fleet of autonomous robotaxis would be on the road today. They're not. They will be. Maybe 3 years, maybe 4, maybe 5, maybe 3, maybe 5. But it's important to differentiate between long-term goals that exist largely in the unknown and short-term goals that have a lot of time pressure on them, right? If Elon had been 5 years wrong on being able to produce a working car, Tesla would be dead. But if he's wrong on autonomy, that's a peripheral, right? If you and I are wrong about when we will meet our soulmate, we thought we'd meet them last month, we're going to meet them next year, we can still pay the rent. We can still get our car, right? If we're going on a road trip through a blizzard, and we're wrong. We believed we could get there, but we ran out of gas 50 miles from the destination, from the heat. We freeze to death. Those types of things require precision. The things where we've got to make payment, we've got to meet this goal. It's not good enough to grow food 3 years in the future. We need food by next month. If the shipment doesn't arrive, there's starvation. And so it's important that we learn competency in kind of the daily sustaining goals of food and shelter and rent and medical treatment and gas in our cars. That is dialed in and reliable. Now, once we get that down, we can dream about things in the next 1,000 years. And we can think maybe it'll be done in my lifetime. Maybe I could do this in 10 years. Now, if we can't, and we understand, and everyone involved understands the vulnerability of the unknown, that's fine. But if those basics are not covered, then it becomes a traumatic event. It becomes an issue of survival. Thanks for joining me in exploring these ideas. Hi, I'm Dane Rose. all knowledge begins with a paradigm, and out of that paradigm comes an idea, an awareness that we adopt, reject, or synthesize into something better. It doesn't become wisdom, it doesn't become useful until we take action, until we integrate it into not only our thoughts, but our feelings, our body, our words, and our way of being. For that to occur, we have to move from the passive media paradigm into more active engagement. In the link below, in the More Information section, is an invitation to join a very small, deliberately filtered, high-quality discussion with a group of people who share a common language and want to work with these ideas, with me and with one another, with the sole goal of creating 10 times more sustainable well-being for ourselves and those around us per unit of energy invested. Thank you for watching.